I, 42M, never thought I'd be in this position. 5 years ago, I was signing divorce papers in a cramped lawyer's office while my ex sobbed about how I was throwing away 15 years of marriage. Now, I'm sitting in my home office staring at an email that could either save or destroy the man who took everything from me. It started 3 years ago when my kids came home from their weekend visit with their mom. My daughter was unusually quiet, and my son wouldn't look me in the eye. I knew something was wrong. They're usually chattering nonstop about their weekends. After dinner, while we were doing dishes, my daughter finally broke down. "Dad, Mom and Stepdad want us to change our last name," she whispered, hands shaking as she dried a plate. "They said it would make us a real family." I nearly dropped the glass I was washing. My kids were 12 and 14 at the time, old enough to understand the weight of what they were asking, but young enough to be manipulated by guilt and pressure. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked if this was what they wanted. The silence that followed told me everything. Over the next few months, it became a war of attrition. My ex and her new husband wore the kids down with promises and emotional manipulation. They painted this picture of a perfect blended family, all sharing the same last name. My protests were dismissed as being difficult. The courts weren't much help, since the kids were old enough to have a say, and their mother had primary custody. My objections fell on deaf ears. I'll never forget the day I saw their new school IDs. My surname, the name that connected us through generations, had been replaced by his. My ex's new husband, the tech startup CEO who swept in with his fancy cars and promises of private schools, had effectively erased the last visible tie I had to my children. I buried myself in my work after that. My small consulting firm specialized in turning around struggling tech companies, and I threw myself into every project that came my way. It was easier than going home to an empty house where even the photographs felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Then last week, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was formal, but I recognized the sender immediately, my ex's husband's company. They were in trouble, the kind of trouble that could sink a business overnight. A failed product launch, mismanaged funds, and a mass exodus of key employees had left them teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. They needed someone with my expertise, someone who could step in and right the ship. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had systematically dismantled my family now needed my help to save his company. The company whose success he had used to convince my kids that he could give them a better life than I ever could. I've spent the last 3 days going through their financials. It's bad, worse than they're admitting in the email. Without immediate intervention, they'll be bankrupt within months. My ex's comfortable life with her new husband would crumble. The private schools, the vacation homes, all the things that helped convince my kids to change their names, gone. Part of me wants to delete the email and let it all burn. Let them feel a fraction of the loss I've felt. But then I think about my kids. They're still in those expensive schools, still living that lifestyle. A lifestyle I could never provide on my own. The practical part of my brain knows that their stability matters more than my revenge. I'm meeting with their board tomorrow morning. My ex's husband doesn't know I'm the consultant they're bringing in. The email came through a third party. I keep imagining the look on his face when I walk into that conference room. Will he be as smug as he was in that courtroom 3 years ago? Will he still act like he's doing my kids a favor by replacing me? The whiskey in my glass isn't helping me figure out what to do. My finger hovers over the keyboard as I contemplate my response. One email could set everything in motion, either their salvation or their downfall. The power should feel good, but it just makes me tired. Tired of being the bad guy when I say no. Tired of being taken advantage of when I say yes. My daughter called earlier. She's excited about her upcoming school trip, one of those expensive enrichment programs her stepdad's money pays for. She barely mentioned him, but I could hear it in her voice. The comfort, the security, the life she's grown accustomed to. A life that might disappear if I don't step in. The clock on my desk shows 2 a.m. In 6 hours, I have to walk into that conference room and make a decision that will affect not just my ex and her husband, but my children's future. The weight of it sits heavy in my chest as I pour another drink. The conference room feels colder than it should for a May morning. I arrived early, watching the board members file in one by one, their faces drawn with concern. They don't know who I am yet. The third-party consulting firm handled all the preliminaries. I'm just another suit with a laptop, here to either save or sink their company. My ex's husband walks in last, his usually impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. The designer suit can't hide the dark circles under his eyes or the way his hands shake slightly as he sets down his coffee. He's scrolling through his phone, probably checking the company's tanking stock price, when he finally looks up and sees me. The color drains from his face so fast I think he might pass out. For a split second, I enjoy it, that pure, unfiltered shock. Then the board chairman starts the introductions, and we're all professionals again, pretending this isn't the most uncomfortable meeting of our lives. I start my presentation, laying out the brutal facts. Their flagship product, the one they'd bet everything on, is fundamentally flawed. The market research was skewed, the development rushed, and the launch was a disaster. But it's the financial mismanagement that really catches everyone's attention. Money meant for R&D was diverted to marketing, creating a house of cards that's now collapsing. Your burn rate is unsustainable, I explain, clicking through slides that show just how dire their situation is. Without immediate intervention and a complete restructuring, you'll be insolvent within 3 months. My ex's husband sits there, growing paler with each slide. He knows what this means. The board members are already whispering among themselves, shooting him looks that range from disappointed to furious. His dream of being the next tech visionary is crumbling in real time. The solution I propose is aggressive but necessary. A complete leadership overhaul, significant layoffs, and a pivot back to their original, profitable product line. It would mean demoting the current CEO, my ex's husband, to an advisory role. His baby, his vision, would effectively be taken away from him. During the break, he corners me in the hallway. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he hisses, trying to keep his voice down. "Getting your revenge?" I look at him, really look at him, for the first time in years. The polished facade is gone, replaced by something desperate and angry. "This isn't about revenge," I tell him quietly. "This is business. Your business, which you ran into the ground while you were busy playing happy families with mine." He flinches at that, but recovers quickly. "They chose this family," he snaps. "They chose me. Or have you forgotten?" Before I can respond, the board chairman calls us back in. The next 2 hours are a blur of negotiations and planning. The board is receptive to my proposal. They know they're out of options. My ex's husband sits silently as his company is essentially taken away from him, piece by piece. When the meeting ends, I pack up my laptop, ready to head back to my office. The chairman asks me to stay behind. "We want you to oversee the transition," he says. "Full control, whatever resources you need. Just turn this around." I should say no. I should walk away and let someone else deal with this mess. But I think about my kids, about the stability they've grown used to. "I'll need complete autonomy," I say, "and the current CEO needs to cooperate fully." The chairman agrees immediately. As I leave the building, my phone buzzes. It's my ex. Of course he's already called her. "How dare you?" she starts, her voice shaking. "After everything, Daff." "After everything what?" I cut her off. "After you let him pressure our kids into changing their names? After you stood by while he systematically pushed me out of their lives? Or after he ran his company into the ground and now needs my help to fix it?" There's a long pause. When she speaks again, her voice is different, smaller. "The kids can't know how bad it is," she says. "Please." They're finally settled, finally happy. I think about my daughter's excited phone call about her school trip, about my son's college plans. "I'm not doing this for you or him," I tell her. "I'm doing it for them. But things are going to change." Over the next week, I practically live at their office. The more I dig, the worse it gets. My ex's husband had been playing fast and loose with company funds, using creative accounting to hide the real problems. He'd been so focused on maintaining their lifestyle, on proving he could provide the perfect life for his new family, that he'd lost sight of actually running the business. It comes to a head during a late-night strategy session. He's been fighting me on every decision, undermining my authority with the team. Finally, I've had enough. "You want to know why I took this job?" I ask him after everyone else has left. "It's not about you. It's not even about the company. It's about my kids. Yes, my kids, who deserve stability in their lives. You took their name. You took their time. You took every chance you got to push me aside. But you don't get to take their future too." He slumps in his chair, suddenly looking old. "I was trying to give them everything," he says quietly. "No," I correct him. "You were trying to prove something. And now look where we are." As I drive home that night, my son calls. He's nervous about something. I can tell by the way he keeps clearing his throat. Finally, he gets to the point. "Dad, I've been thinking about college applications," he says. "And I was wondering if I could use your name. Our name. Just professionally, you know? I have to pull over because my hands are shaking too hard to drive." "You can use whatever name you want, buddy," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's still yours. It always has been." There's a relief in his voice that breaks my heart. "Thanks, Dad. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's your choice. I finish for him. Not mine, not your mom's, not his. Yours. After we hang up, I sit in my car for a long time, watching the city lights blur through my windshield. Tomorrow, I'll go back to that office and continue the work of salvaging what's left of my ex's husband's company. I'll do it because it's the right thing for my kids. But maybe, just maybe, something else is being salvaged too. 3 months into the company turnaround, and things are finally starting to stabilize. The layoffs were brutal but necessary. We've scaled back operations, sold off the failing product line, and started rebuilding from our core strengths. The board is cautiously optimistic, and the stock price has stopped its free fall. My ex's husband, now officially senior advisor rather than CEO, has been surprisingly cooperative since our late-night confrontation. Maybe it's because he finally realizes how close he came to losing everything, or maybe he's just tired of fighting. Either way, he's been quietly helpful, pointing out potential issues before they become problems. The real surprise came last week during a family dinner. My daughter had been begging for weeks to have everyone together, me, her mom, her stepdad, all at one table. I agreed mostly to stop her asking, though I suspected I'd regret it. We met at a neutral restaurant, everyone tense and overly polite. Halfway through the meal, my son cleared his throat. "I've made a decision," he announced, looking nervously around the table. "I'm applying to colleges with Dad's last name." The silence that followed was deafening. My ex's husband set down his fork carefully, his face unreadable. My ex started to say something, then stopped. I held my breath, waiting for the explosion that didn't come. Instead, my ex's husband nodded slowly. "I understand," he said quietly. "It's your choice." My daughter, always the peacemaker, jumped in. "I've been thinking about it too," she admitted. "Not changing back, not right now, but maybe using both? For important things." I watched my ex's husband absorb this, saw the moment he realized that his perfect family narrative was cracking. But instead of anger, I saw something else in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or resignation. Later, as we were leaving the restaurant, he pulled me aside. "The company," he started, then paused. "I know what you could have done, what most people would have done, in your position. Thank you for not doing it." I looked at him for a long moment. "You know, they never needed the big house or the fancy schools," I said finally. "They just needed us to stop using them as weapons against each other." He nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. "I thought if I could just give them everything, be everything. But that was never the point, was it?" "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." The next day at the office, we had our first genuinely productive strategy session. He knows this industry, knows the clients, and without the pressure of being the visionary CEO, he's actually good at what he does. We're not friends, we'll never be friends, but we found a way to work together that doesn't feel like swallowing glass. My son submitted his college applications last week. When he showed me the name he'd used, his original name, my name, I didn't cry. I waited until I got home for that. My daughter has started hyphenating her name on her school papers, a small change that feels enormous. My ex hasn't said anything about it, but I noticed she stopped pushing the "one big happy family" narrative so hard. The company will survive. It won't be the tech unicorn my ex's husband dreamed of, but it'll be stable, profitable, and secure. Kind of like our new family arrangement. Not perfect, not what anyone planned, but working in its own way. Yesterday, I finally deleted that original email asking for help. I've kept it all this time, maybe as a reminder of where this all started, but I don't need it anymore. We're all moving forward, carrying our own names, writing our own stories. The kids are coming over for dinner tonight. Just a regular Tuesday, nothing special. My daughter texted earlier asking if she could bring her math homework. She's struggling with calculus, and apparently neither her mom nor stepdad can help. Some things don't change, I guess. I was always the numbers guy. My son wants to talk about college visits. He's applying to engineering schools. "Like you, Dad," he said, and my heart did that funny squeeze thing it does these days. My ex's husband recommended some programs, good ones. Actually, I added them to the list without comment. It's not perfect. It's not even close to what I imagined for my family all those years ago. But watching my kids grow into themselves, making their own choices about who they are and who they want to be, that's something better than perfect. That's real. And maybe that's the biggest lesson in all of this. Sometimes saving something means letting it change into what it needs to be, not what you try to force it to become. True for companies, true for families, true for names. I check my watch. Time to head home and start dinner. My kids are coming over, and I don't want to be late.